Hello, and welcome to On the Irregular with Java Beret, a podcast where I chat to women from all walks of life about their own unique creative journey, how they got here, how their story has shaped their creative work, what they've learned, what has helped them, and where they plan to go from here. It's an irregular journey for so many of us, and I am delighted to offer a platform to share these fascinating stories and wells of wisdom. This week, I'm talking to Jenny Oak, baker and co-owner of Longbois Bakehouse in South Manchester. Originally from York, Jenny left school with an armful of A grades and very little idea of what she wanted to do. Because her academic learning skills were strong, she was encouraged to pursue this route and applied to do geography at uni. Nearly 15 years later, via several other cafes, bakeries and patisseries, Jenny has now co-opened a bakery and patisserie in South Manchester. On the corner of a quiet street lined with red brick houses, you will find a refuge for your sweet tooth, filled with cakes and pastries worthy of Marie Antoinette. If you're lucky, it won't be raining when you join the queue winding out the door. Join us to find out how Jenny got here, what it was like opening a food business amidst a pandemic, and why she loves the food and hospitality business quite so much. Welcome to episode 12 with baker extraordinaire Jenny Oak. Thank you for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks.
So, for the sake of the listeners, if you wouldn't mind starting a bit from the beginning about where you're from York, and a bit about your family background.
So I'm from York, which is a tiny, beautiful place that I didn't really appreciate until I left, which I think is very classic. So when you're a teenager, you're not thinking like, wow, this is so historic and so nice, and I have so much freedom. Like, we just used to walk and cycle everywhere, and my parents really would just let me and my sister do what we wanted. And then my parents are very arty, creative people. My dad runs his own business designing exhibitions and museums. And my mum's background is very creative as well. She did jewelry and silversmithing at uni, but then worked for in charities for years. And my sister, she just did fashion all the way through from college and ended up at Royal College of Art and doing a degree in like men's fashion design. And she tailors and is a stylist in London. So yeah, everyone's like very creative. And I think that's maybe what was confusing for me, because I think I do have that in me. I'm also very creative, but then I was very academic. And I think my dad especially was a bit like, why don't you go and do the academic thing? Because I think he knew the struggle of the creative industries and was like, maybe you don't have to do that, and that'll be really nice. Like, you can just kind of go into something quite easily. But yeah, like, I was an all-rounder, and it was my teachers. I think it happens a lot because you're kind of less bother. So your teachers are just like, well, you just go do whatever you want. And you're like, actually, I think you need as much guidance as the people who are maybe struggling with finding anything they want to do. Because
there's something that you said about, because you kind of were struggling to find degrees, and you tried a few different ones, and then there was something that you said about how when you found the one that you ended up staying with, I think, I'm not going to say it because I of course want you to tell me, but that you were annoyed that people hadn't explained that there are degree courses that you can do that aren't just direct courses from what you do, at school or at college, that it's so much broader than what you're studying at school.
Absolutely. And you kind of, like, my teachers were just a bit like, what are you going to pick? And your A-levels are just continuations of like what you've done at GCSE. So I did English literature, art, geography, German. It's all very like, yep, you just carry on. And then I ended up really not knowing what to do. I knew I wanted to go to uni. I knew I wanted to go to be in Manchester, which is nice to have that, at least have that direction. But I just didn't know what I wanted to do. And my lovely art teacher was like, why don't you apply for foundation and also apply for a degree? And then you've kind of got options and you can think about it a bit more. And my dad kind of told me not to do foundation, I think for the reasons what everybody said. I think also he was kind of a bit like, you don't need to do it. Like, if you're going to go do something creative, just do it. Don't spend another year.
That's a fair point.
Yeah. And then, so I ended up going to Manchester to do geography, and I lasted one term. I just remember having this phone call with my mum at Christmas, and she was just like, you don't really want to be there doing that. And I was like, no, I think you need to have that sometimes you need that other person who knows you really well to like voice the fact like what you're thinking, but just to confirm it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I came back in January back to York, and then went and looked at all the different courses that Manchester Uni do. Like I just hadn't even thought to start there and look at everything. And ended up getting a place for the following September. I did social anthropology with art history and classics. It was the Department of Combined Studies, and it doesn't exist anymore. And I think that's so sad, because so many people would benefit from doing lots of different things and having a much broader teaching, I think. Yeah.
And so while you were doing social anthropology, did you have an idea of where that was going to take you? And you said museum studies. Did you?
So I basically just started by picking everything I kind of thought I'd be interested in, and then kind of like by my second year realized that I was really into like museums and art galleries. And so I kind of tailored my third year, so it was kind of like a precursor to the art gallery museum studies masters that I then went on to do. And I basically, you're not meant to do a dissertation for combined studies, I think, because you haven't necessarily done enough of any one subject. But I basically pleaded and was like, please let me write this really hard long essay, and did it in social anthropology. But it was basically about museums. It was about social media in museums and how it was going to be game changing, which is really funny now. I wrote about Twitter and everyone was like, what's Twitter? So that was really interesting, really fun, and definitely would just help me get into my master's.
Gosh. And so then when did food and hospitality come into your life?
Well, I've always worked. I've had a job since I was 14, and I worked on the crepe stall in New York. For it's like family friends ran, it's like crepe stall in the winter, and then it was like ice cream and lemonade in the summer. So I think I'd like always been around food, but I hadn't, and I would love food. My parents aren't really into it. So I think if you're not brought up in that environment, I don't think I'd ever really considered that it was a career necessarily.
Yeah. I find it fascinating when people aren't into food. Really, like, in some ways, it must be quite freeing to not be into food because it takes up a huge part of my brain space.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can see that. I guess if it's not something that's, I guess, celebrated or prioritized, then it just wouldn't even be on your radar as an option.
No, we were like definitely like proper 80s vegetarians. Like we had like the same like cheese and onion flan, lovely wholemeal pastry, like that kind of like macaroni cheese. It was very like we had the same few things. Like it was all good and delicious, and I'm so glad I was brought up vegetarian. So there's obviously some kind of like thought process there, but maybe not in the same way as me. Like, and it's so funny looking back. You know, you have those like day books at school. Like you'd go in on a Monday and you'd write what you'd done during your weekend. I'm sure kids must still do it, I guess. But looking back on those, my mum had brought like the books of all my schoolwork, and I was looking in my like weekend books, and everything is centered around food. It's like, this is where I went this weekend and I ate this, and then we went here and I ate this. And it's like when I kind of eventually got into food, my mum and dad were like, where did that come from? And I think I was always obsessed but I just like I wasn't quite in the right environment to
That's so great that you have that to look back on.
Yes, so funny.
Piece it all together. That's lovely. And it's funny that you're saying that about about the food, what sounds like quite kind of functional. Yeah, delicious, but functional, kind of, it's something that you eat to fuel you. Whereas the area of food that you are working now, it's all, it's about the taste. I have yet to taste your bacon. But it looks absolutely delicious, but also it's so ornate and so colourful, and it's, it works on several sensory levels, not just a plain cake. So you've really flown with So getting back to so you'd always had a job and you worked on the crepe stall, and then so obviously when I dropped out of uni, my mum was like, well, that's fine, come back, but you need to get a job, obviously like straight away. So I just walked into and it literally just closed recently, like last year because of the pandemic. There's a restaurant in York, and it's a bit of a York institution just by the Minster called Cafe Concerto. And it was one of my mum's favorite places to go. And I was thinking about it last night when I wrote this. I wrote my CV, which must have just been nothing. Do you know, just like, what
was even on it because I was 18 and I hadn't really done much at all. But I just happened to go in, and Chris, the manager, was like, actually, someone's leaving, and like, yeah, like come in. And then I ended up, yeah, working full time at the restaurant. It was my first waitressing job, really. And then just met all these amazing people who were like, everyone was kind of a York uni student. So everyone was a bit older than me. And everyone just was just so nice and took me under their wing. And I feel like that experience was so formative. Like I was definitely very shy. Like I had lots of friends always, but just was quite quiet and like wasn't outgoing really. And I think it just completely changed me. I ended up going, I worked there all summer, like, and then went traveling. And then actually when I went to uni again, I used to come back and work Christmas, Easter, summer holidays there. Like I just loved it. Yeah, and I'm in contact with so many of the people, like some of my best friends from that time. Just so nice. Like
that's so beautiful. I loved what you said in your email about how you've never come across that kind of working environment in other areas, especially not in offices. The fact that, you know, people come in, work hard, and you all look after each other, make sure you're all fed, make sure you're all okay. Of course, it's not like that in every hospitality environment. I've worked in a couple where it really wasn't the case. Because I feel like there's two different people in hospitality: the people that are passionate about it, and the people who are doing it in between acting jobs.
Yeah.
So it was lovely to hear it from your perspective, because you have chosen it as your absolute like life purpose at the moment.
Yeah, I think I was so lucky that the owners of that restaurant in particular, like Roz and Ian, were this couple, and they'd met in hospitality and they obviously just like loved it. So I feel like I've always been chasing after recreating that kind of environment, like that was just amazing that they managed to create for themselves. And yeah, like Ian actually passed away like a couple of years ago, and I went back to York for the funeral, and honestly hundreds of people there that had worked at the restaurant, and just so many people talking about such amazing lovely memories. And it was like, obviously my time was like a certain era, and then before that in the 90s it was like this whole other set of people, that loads of people I hadn't even met before, but similar experiences. And I just thought like it's such a special thing that they managed to create and also keep going for like 30 odd years.
Oh, that's so wonderful, because it's that magical combination of food and community, really creating a place that people love to go back to, and you feel that you know them and they know you.
Yeah.
Oh, that sounds gorgeous.
Yeah. So
wow. So then, okay, so you dropped out. So you ended up doing social anthropology and museum studies, and then you went into that world for a while, didn't you?
yeah, I did. I always had part-time jobs all the way through uni in food, one of which was at a bakery. When I was like, I think I was like 20. It was maybe my first job after that, when I stopped going back to York every holiday and then kind of stayed in Manchester during the holidays. Yeah. And it was a bakery in West Tisbury, and I was there right at the beginning, part of like the original team. So I was doing that part-time all the way through to my master's and after. And I kind of, now I look back and I'm like, oh yeah, obviously I carried on being in hospitality because that's what I knew, and it kind of made me feel safe and I had fun there. But I didn't really think it was like a serious career choice. So I ended up, I did my master's. I ended up working at Nexus Art Cafe after that.
Yeah, because Nexus was quite a unique place at the time, wasn't it? Because I remember it opening, because it would be open late, very late, but they didn't serve alcohol.
No, because it's owned by the Methodist Church above it. So it's a completely dry building. So they used to run a thing called the Night Cafe, which basically just meant that it was like a safe place in the middle of town, which at that time, like the Northern Quarter, wasn't particularly nice at nighttime. Was quite sketchy. Like obviously just a place that doesn't need to exist now, I don't think, like in the same way. But obviously when the pubs and clubs and stuff used to close, like people would just get turfed out, and Uber didn't exist, and it was hard to get a taxi. So then Nexus was this like little haven in the nighttime, run by volunteers, where you could just go like have a cup of tea and like wind down and like ring a taxi. And again, actually the community there was just amazing. More friends I have met from that place. who I'm still really good friends with. And I kind of think it was a nice in between, because it was actually an office job. Like I was running the charity, but it also was based in this cafe. So I guess I got like the best of both worlds there. Yeah, I stayed there for a while, and then funding was getting harder and harder to get. And they kind of said, like, if you can stay, but you have to find all your own funding for your role. And I was just like, I was only like 22, and I was like, that just sounds terrifying, and I don't really know how to do that.
Yeah.
So I ended up leaving, getting a bar job for a bit, and then then I got my first proper office job, which was at it's a research agency for audiences in art galleries and museums, because obviously art galleries and museums need funding, and they need to be proving that they're doing the right things. So they hire these research agencies to come in and work all the time with their audiences. I'd go in and like we'd test like ideas for new exhibitions with like specific, like, you know, like handpick people who get paid to come and talk to me for like an hour. But yeah, I mostly worked with the British Museum, which was amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. And so what veered you off course?
I think I just wasn't convinced by it. Was meant to be this like amazing creative company, and I didn't feel it. Like I didn't think it was. I think actually it was just an office, and there was this like real horrible power structure, which I was right at the bottom of, even though we were all working so hard. And there was this real culture of being like, everyone needs to work overtime, but none of us got paid for it. And I just kind of didn't feel as though, I kind of felt it was all a bit of a lie. And it was just, I hate that idea of like working overtime for free shouldn't exist. Such a big thing in this country. And also was working on a lower pay grade for so long when I was actually doing way more work and not getting paid for it. I said to you in this email, I bet I had a run-in with the CEO because I'm bullshit like that. And I was just a bit like, no, like basically it was meant to be, I was pushing for a promotion because I was already doing the job that I should have the title for. And I discussed my pay with another person in the same role as me, research assistant, and found out that she was being paid more than me, even though she'd been there for less time and was doing less work. So I brought this up with the CEO. And he obviously like acted completely defensively. I was like, we can, you know, like I can threaten you with a disciplinary for discussing those things. And I was like, no, you can't. Like, it's just not true. Like, it's not in my contract not to discuss those things. And obviously we're allowed to talk about that stuff. Like, I think I definitely had come from a different world at that point and was like, why not? Why can't we just all be open?
Yeah.
So after that, I kind of realized maybe the office, it just wasn't for me. I think I just knew that I was never going to be content there. And sitting down all day, it's just so weird.
Oh, yeah. I think I felt something similar actually when before we left Manchester and we moved to France, John and I had like 3 or 4 different jobs, but one of them was sat at a computer. And luckily there were a few people in the office that I knew and I got on really well with. But I remember sitting there at this desk and just thinking, I think there's a view out onto a concrete building. I just thought, there must be something more than this.
Definitely.
I just like, my body is not made for this.
No.
I don't want to be sat here. I want to be on my feet. I want to be dynamic. I don't know what exactly that thing is, but I know that it's definitely not sitting in this chair in front of this computer.
Yeah, people used to think I was so weird because I'd like leave. We got a lunch hour and I just used to leave and walk around town for an hour.
Yeah.
And people would just be like, do you not just want to sit inside? I'm like, in another room. I'm like, no.
Look at a different wall.
Yeah, I was like, no, actually, like, no, I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was definitely, and I used to do so much like extracurricular stuff, and I think people thought I was like quite unusual in that too. Like at one point I ran a supper club with my one of my friends during that time, and everyone was just like, you're just doing more work outside of work. But I was like, no, but it's different.
Oh, that sounds amazing. Did you do the supper clubs in your house?
No, we actually only did it one time. My friend lived in London and it was just like too much. It just didn't quite work, but we did it at Idle Hands in their original location by Piccadilly Station.
Oh, fantastic. That's because they're a lot of work, supper clubs. Like, I really love the idea of them. And John and I have always talked about it, but it's like, Jesus Christ, the work that goes into, because it's got to be that, it's a level up from just having a dinner party, isn't
Oh
it?
yeah. And there was like 40 people.
Oh my God.
And the idle hands didn't, they had like an oven in the cupboard under the stairs at the site, and that was like it.
Because they were essentially a coffee shop, weren't they?
Yeah, like a very empty coffee shop. Because they weren't going to be, they knew they were only going to be there for like a year on that site. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh gosh. Wow. So okay. So food was already really creeping in under your own agency by that point, then as well. It wasn't just kind of
Yeah.
you were starting to initiate things yourself.
Yeah, and I think I'd worked, so the bar job I had for a few months before the office job, I started getting really into beer. So like I was definitely like very in the beer world. And during my office job time, I'd like started going out with my ex who was a brewer. And so I think I just started meeting people who were like in the food world and so into it. And I kind of realized that actually it was just a career path that I always thought would be amazing, but I'd never really considered I could actually do, or like that it was, I don't know, there's so much like stigma, isn't there, in hospitality? I think of it just being like you said, like people, lots of people do it because they're just passing through, and it's like helping them pay the bills or they go on to the next thing. And I think I'd kind of not considered that there are people who are there because they've definitely picked to be there and worked really hard. And because it's their passion and they want to make it their career. So I think I started meeting so many more people who, yeah, were in that world. And I was like, oh, so I ended up moving to London and met even more amazing people. And I did like this, I kind of didn't know what I wanted to do. I remember the leaving speech that one of my bosses gave at the office job. And she was like, well, we don't really know what you're going to go do, but I'm sure you'll go do it well.
So pretty much the same as school then.
Yeah, exactly. Like, Godspeed, see you later. Just like people like, yeah, obviously couldn't quite work me out.
But they were right.
Yeah. Yeah. And then yeah, so my whole group of friends in London were all brewers. At the Colonel and Brew by Numbers, and yeah, just like amazing hardworking people who like really inspired me to be like, oh, I could go do this. I could kind of work in food, I think. And one of my friends was a cheesemaker, so I kind of went and did a day of work with her, and I kind of started trying out all these different things just to see. I ended up managing a new restaurant in East Dulwich for 6 months, which was amazing, but it made me realize I didn't want to do front of house. Yeah. The owner as well, like she was really lovely and really ambitious, but I think obviously we were like eventually quite different, and I think like that's really tricky because I think, oh, if you want a general manager but you're the owner, you don't want to be the general manager, you kind of have to like work out exactly what you want from the general manager. And I think she was still kind of trying to run the show but also just kind of giving me the job she didn't really want to do, and it's quite, the power balance is wrong, I think. And I think actually she should have just been the general manager and the owner and then had me as assistant or whatever, or a supervisor. So we kind of sat down at the end of 6 months, and I was just like, she was like, we basically just agreed that like maybe it just wasn't for me. And I'm like, so fine. Yeah. So then my friend, he forwarded me a job at a little coffee shop in Brockley that was like running the kitchen. And I just went, I kind of feel like I haven't had any experience of running a kitchen, and they just said yes. So lucky. I did, because I baked in West Tisbury for a bit, so I had the baking on my CV, but yeah, it was just such a tiny team. There was 3 of us. And again, like some of my happiest time, I think maybe my happiest time in London was working there. Like yeah, it was a basement kitchen with no windows, and I had so much fun.
How old were you at this point?
27.
Yeah. And so by this point, had you really decided, okay, this is what I want to focus on?
Yeah, I think by that point I'd realized that I like loved food, loved making food, loved being creative with food. And then it was just such an amazing opportunity because we changed the menu like every 2 weeks. It was like really small stuff like salads and sandwiches and things, and bakes. But I got to work directly with like suppliers, like, and go like there's like a tiny organic farm in the middle of London that we went to. Do you know, like it was just so nice seeing where stuff came from. And my boss had like loads of really great contacts, and yeah, I just feel like I learned so much. I was there like less than a year in the end. But I think I at that point realized that this is what I wanted to do, and I wanted to do it for myself. Yeah.
So you wanted to be able to explore more of what you'd learned and take it and see what you could do with it.
Yeah. And I think once you kind of, because it was a similar size business to I think what I wanted to do, which was like, it was pretty small, but like Ross, my boss, he kind of built up from nothing, and he was really young when he'd started it. And I kind of thought it was just really interesting and inspiring that he kind of knew exactly what he wanted to do, and he had this like idea and he went and did it. So I think that was the point where I was like, oh, like you can just do that. I think I'd always kind of thought like, oh, I'm too young, or where would I get the money from? And I think I started realizing that actually, like if you can do the research and you can go after something, you can just do it.
Yeah. I mean, it's a huge undertaking setting up your own business. I mean, because I've seen, where you've set up now at Longbois, and seen, through the social media posts, and just, buying the ovens, taking on the space. It's huge. Yeah. But you're right. If you decide to go for it, you do the research, you do a business plan, you take it seriously. There's no reason why there should be an age put on it, especially as, if you feel prepared and you've been working in that area, then.
Yeah, and I kind of, as soon as we started when we opened the bakery, I was like, why didn't I do this? I could have done it 10 years ago. Like I probably would have been way less experienced, but like there's no reason why. And I think that's what I felt annoyed about with school, is I wonder if it's different now, because I think university is more expensive, but definitely for like our generation, it was very much like you go to school, you do A levels, and then you go to uni, but like it's not for everyone. And it doesn't necessarily, especially like museum studies, like so many of my friends don't work in museums from that course. Like it's really hard to get into. And I think people aren't explicit with that, obviously, are they? Because they want you to go and pay to do the course.
Yeah, exactly. And so, okay, so after leaving London, so what instigated the departure from London?
I'd split up with the person that I moved down there with, which was fine. I actually stayed like for a year after that and had a great time, because I love London so much. But it's just so expensive.
It's so expensive. It's such a great place to learn about food, though, isn't it?
Yeah, and met like so many people, doing interesting things, and there's so many amazing places to eat and drink all the time. But it's just being able to afford to do those things. Like it's just so hard to live there money wise.
I know, that's why I kind of decided never to move there, because I thought I just really like visiting, because I can do those things. I can't do all of them, but I can at least go and enjoy some of it without worrying too much about paying the rent.
Yeah, exactly. I do feel like I spent my last summer there, like sitting at home watching RuPaul's Drag Race. Like I just didn't go out. It was just, I just had nothing. And I was like, you know what, like this is great and I love being here, but actually like, well, a friend actually, the one who I worked at the research agency with, who we'd talked about a pay and got into trouble about, she was now working at Unicorn.
Oh, okay.
So she went into food as well, which is
Unicorn is a whole food shop in Manchester, just to know, yeah.
And she had kind of thought about splitting off and opening up. She wanted to open up like a tiny local like grocery shop in like Old Trafford. She kind of had approached me and was like, maybe you want to go in on this with me. And I was like, do you know what, yes, and I'd like to even go back and just explore the options around doing a kind of something like that. So I think I need to move back. So I moved back to Manchester. And then I actually that's when I started. Well, we discussed it a few times, and I think actually eventually we decided that isn't what we were going to do. And she's still at Unicorn, so she's like the fruit and veg buyer.
Okay. Unicorn is such an institution.
Yeah, well, I ended up doing my last year before Longbois there. So um it really is. It's such an amazing place. There's nothing like it in London, which is mad.
Because
Like,
it's almost like it kind of makes me think of American. Is it Whole
yeah.
Foods? Like
Yeah,
American
yeah.
level of kind of Whole Food shops. Like it's just like a supermarket.
Yeah, a supermarket that's all vegan, mostly organic. This amazing range, like a fruit and veg. Yeah, the first time I went, because I have family in San Francisco, and the first time I found it, I think I was in my third year of uni, and I went with my friend Kat, who'd also spent time in San Francisco, and we just walked in and we were like, we're in California. Like, it's such an insane place, and people take it for granted now, I think. Like,
Yeah, it was. You know what? It was aside from friends. It was one of the main reasons we were reluctant to leave Manchester because we lived up the road from it. It's like, I don't think I could live without Unicorn.
I have friends who like now live in Scotland who come back and do their like 6 monthly shop there and just stock up. Like,
Yeah, it's such a fantastic place. So okay, so you went, and then so how did you get to Longbois? Beautiful,
yeah.
beautiful Longbois.
So when I moved back to Manchester, a friend got me a job at Wolf House, which was the bakery in Mackymare, the big market hall in the centre of Manchester. So I ended up baking there. And actually my boss there, like, she had worked at the Rose Bakery in Paris. She was like so particular. And at the time I was like, but now I'm like so glad I had that education. Because it was just a whole other way of doing things that I hadn't, and I bet like an even higher standard of like baking that I just hadn't learned before.
So
And I
kind
think,
of like patisserie.
yeah, like she really like the first few days of me working there. I remember she basically just made me like watch her mix things, and I was like, surely this isn't useful, but it definitely was. Um,
Wow.
I'm so, yeah, glad. It's one of those things that I'm glad she taught me how to be so particular about things.
That's because from what I see from what you bake, it's very precise and exquisite and detailed, and that is where you kind of it's not slapdash baking. Not that I mean you can't really do slapdash baking, but but even more so, it looks like it's very exact what goes
Yeah,
into your baking.
yeah, definitely. I think, yeah, being there definitely taught me a lot about just like, yeah, like slowing down and like being patient and doing things properly. Yeah. So then I was at Wolfhouse for a year, and then I went to Pollen, um, which again was like another experience, like because that's the first time I'd worked with like pastry, like croissants and things.
Okay.
And then I went to Shop, which is like a little donut shop in the middle of town. And then it was kind of like while I was at Pollen, I kind of started talking to another baker there about setting up a bakery. I think I kind of hadn't until that point, like I hadn't really thought about the place where I was going to open being a bakery. So I think it was like that last couple of years in Manchester that I kind of realized that is actually what I wanted to do.
Hmm. So had you thought that like your friends are like maybe like a grocery shop come?
Yeah, like a cafe, like I think when I well, because I love the production, so I think it makes sense that I've opened a bakery that's just retail front, like there's no seats. Um, yes, and then obviously made all these plans and then found the site in Levenshulme. And then that was December 2019. And then we were about to sign it literally in the beginning of March 2020. And then obviously the pandemic happened.
God.
And was definitely having conversations with the people I was about to sign for with. And I remember literally the beginning of March, do you know when lockdown happened, we were just like, maybe we just can't do this. Maybe that's it. Which was actually really sad. But I think I was like, no, like this is definitely what I want to do. So kind of fought for it really. And our landlord was amazingly nice. So I've been working at Unicorn for a year to kind of save up money and try and pick up the baking for our own business. And it was my landlord's daughter also works at Unicorn.
Okay.
So we were lucky because like Sam, who I work with, she basically really championed us to have that building.
Oh, that's so lovely.
Yeah, and our landlord was just like, "Don't worry, like I'm just gonna sit on this place, like it's yours."
Oh,
Um,
wow.
so yeah, we didn't sign for it until August.
Wow, that's incredibly generous on their
So
part.
generous. And then he still gave us 2 months rent free. I was like, Chris, you
No.
can't do this. I think we're so lucky because I think he just really cares about he wanted to really handpick the business that went into that building.
Wow, that
mm,
can there be more landlords like that,
I
please?
know.
That's so lovely.
So nice.
Oh,
Yeah.
fantastic. But I know the kind of I'm so desperate to come and visit, and I need to because my stepdad lives around the corner from you, and because I
Mhm.
lived in Levenshulme very briefly, and it's like one of those old corner shops on the
Yeah.
corner of a street, isn't it? There's because you're off, you're not on the main road, you're kind of off from there, aren't you?
No, we're like quite far back. Like it is a residential street. It was for year. It was a corner shop and an off license for years. So people come in and they have such a nice. They'll be like, "Oh, we used to buy our sweets from here when we were little," and they'll like tell me where everything was like when they used to come in and where it was laid out. And I think, and quite often people come in and say like, "Oh, I thought I'd taken the wrong turning, but then you're just here."
Yeah.
Um,
You must be like this little gem that people, like you find an oasis, turn around a corner and there's Longbois Bakes full of cakes.
yeah, I definitely wanted that. Like, a few people have been in and be like, "Oh, it feels really American," because do you know when you have those like neighborhood like bakeries and like bodegas and stuff? And I think a lot of people have said it feels like that because it is on a residential street, and I think we did take a bit of a risk doing that, but actually, like, I think we just wanted to create like a little destination, and it feels like a treat. I think it feels like a treat when people come and find us, and yeah, like hidden away.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I really get that sense that it's a destination bakery
Yeah,
in the heart of Levenshulme because people I know, I've mentioned it, oh, I've heard of that. I need to get there one day. And they're going to travel and make a trip specifically to eat your cakes.
yeah,
That's so beautiful that you've created that space and it is quite magical.
yeah. I think that's what a bakery should be. Like,
Yeah.
I feel like it should feel like an absolute treat to
Yeah.
be there. Like, yeah.
Yeah, that's true actually. Because when you think about, I don't know, I think like films and stories that are told, and bakeries often hold that kind of magical place. Like I'm
Yeah.
thinking because I generally watch kids' TV at the moment. There's a scene in The Highway Rat by Julia Donaldson, where because the rat is obsessed with eating cakes, he's a very greedy rat, so he keeps on stealing cakes from everybody. And then the end scene, he's been cast away, like got lost in a cave, and then he's found his way back out, and now he's a how do you say it, a converted rat, and he gets a job in a bakery. And the snow's falling outside, and he's in there sweeping the floor, and there's the glow coming, and it's just such a beautiful, yeah. Because I guess it's like it's the warmth, and it's like the oven, and people love being in kitchens, don't they? People like at your
Yeah.
parties, everyone always ends up with a kitchen, and
Yeah.
bakeries kind of have that sense, and you are going in for something special, especially if it's like a patisserie like yours, where it's colourful and you choose something so carefully and what it is that you like, or it's going to be a gift for somebody. There's so much love that goes into the whole experience.
Yeah. I do wonder if like York has helped me. Do you know, I think that like the shopping experience in York is quite, or it used to be, not so much anymore, but there was lots of places like
Yeah,
that.
I can imagine because I've only been to York once, but I remember really, I think it was close to Christmas as well when I went,
Yeah.
and it was just lit up. It was
Yeah.
so beautiful. Everywhere was just all these twinkling lights and little shop windows that you want to peer into. So you've brought a little bit of the States and a little bit of York to
Yeah.
Levenshulme in Manchester. So how was your first year post-pandemic then?
Do you know, we actually did so well. We joke about how lockdown is great for us. Because yeah, it was terrifying. We literally opened the week that Manchester went into tier 3.
Right.
I don't really remember the tiers anymore.
I can't remember them either, God.
But it was like basically everything was closed apart from food, takeaway food, which is us. We've always just been retail takeaway food. And when the pubs are closed, people, and we are the treat, we're the only treat, you know, that people have access to. So we were just insanely busy from the word go. And people would come and queue, which I just still can't get my head around. Like, people will just come and stand in the rain and the cold and wait, and it's just so, so nice. And I think we have this real, because we've worked in lots of places where maybe like the service has been quite like cold, you know, when people, I think in the centre of Manchester sometimes it can be like a bit hipster and people find it a bit intimidating, and we just didn't ever want to be that. We wanted to be like, as soon as you're in there, we want it to be like warm and welcoming, and you feel as though you have the time to take as much time to like look around and take everything in. And I think if you read our reviews, which are so sweet, lots of people do mention that is the thing. Like, it's a whole experience that you come in, and like we're super friendly, and you know, like everyone's welcome. And I think, well, we just celebrated our first birthday and we got loads of cards from just regulars.
That's so lovely.
Yeah, so I think, again, like going back to like my restaurant experience in York, I think people were like that as well. Like, it was definitely like a favorite that people kept going back to and back to. And I think if you can become that in people's lives, then it's amazing, because then you have all these regular customers who will be loyal.
Yeah. That's because then that fulfills so many parts of, I think, what makes up a happy life, because you feel part of the community, you're creating something that you enjoy, you have relationships that are positive and that feel, you know, reciprocal, and you know, they're adding something to your life, you're adding something to their life. That's so beautiful. Because how many of you are there?
At the moment, there's only 3 of us. It's me and my business partner Sarah, and then we have one full-time member of staff, Sharon, who bakes but also does front of house. Oh, I'm lying. There's Amy, who does Fridays and front of house for us. We've kind of only ever at any one time, there's only ever been 4 or 5 of us. Like, it's really small. Yeah.
Wow. Could you ever see yourself opening another one?
No, people always ask that, and I'm like, I used to get asked like the first 3 years of opening this one. I don't know, like, and people are always like, would you open in town? And I just don't know. I don't know if we would. Like, there's something special about being in a suburb and being part of this little community, I think, which town you don't get as much.
And I guess also some of the things that can make it so special is if it's you, whereas if you then have multiple places, you can't have as much control over.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
That warmth, that slow pace, that welcoming. Yeah. I mean, why, you know, there's always, it's like we're conditioned, aren't we, to always think, right, how can you grow? How can you grow? How can you make this bigger? But it doesn't need to be. Like, what you're doing sounds perfect.
Yeah, for now.
Because can you see, because how are you finding, do you still feel as passionate about the food, you know, about the food, the baking?
Yeah, I think it can be really easy to get caught up in, obviously there's so much to do all the time. Like, we work 6 days a week. And I think sometimes you can get so caught up in like trying to keep the ball rolling and keep on top of everything day to day that you can forget. But I think, yeah, I found that if I just have to take some time to stop sometimes and just do some research, or like look at what someone else is doing, or like go and eat a meal at someone else's place, and then you kind of get back into it. I'm looking forward to maybe having a few more staff at some point, so I can do a bit more of like just the research and the making new things, and yeah,
the refueling yourself with.
Exactly. But I always we expected the first year to be mad, so.
And it has been mad.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. I'm so glad. I really understand that, because part of what makes it magic is the ideas that you bring to it, and you know, your recipes and what you want to create, but then you get so caught up in the admin, the running of the business, to keep that other side up, as you know, that can often be the last thing, and you just kind of like fall back on what you already have. But you definitely need to be, because I can relate to it just in terms of like with my work with illustrating or photos. It's like, no, I kind of need a break now to just take myself off and just absorb loads of other stuff.
Yeah.
and then come back refreshed.
Yeah.
But there's time for that. There's time, isn't there?
Yeah.
And one of the things I really love about Longbois is the aesthetic, because like there's like this beautiful mix of quite traditional styling with really bold modern colours,
Hmm.
and it really works. Did you always have that clear vision of what you wanted it to look like?
I think so. I think like the main brief that was in our minds, we wanted to be fun because again, we worked in town a lot and everything's very Scandi and hipster and grey, and like that is beautiful and is a thing, and I appreciate it. But I think we were just we wanted to reject that a little bit. And I think so we have this amazing like gold lettering on the window, that kind of thing. And that was like, that's definitely just, that was in like the first like Pinterest boards, like at the very, very beginning, like 2.5 years ago. Like, and I think that is, it's almost like a bit Parisian, a bit in New York. And then I think, so we wanted that. And then I think, well, my friend Caroline Dowsett did the mural on the wall. And when she came in, she was like, which wall should I do? And we just kind of looked, it's the first wall you see when you come in and it's huge. And she was just like, yep, okay. And I think that was really like set the tone. So when you come in, it kind of is really big and bold and colorful. And then our other friend Mariella Osborne made our like cake stands, which are just like really like, they're like colorful blobs. And I think just everything, we just kind of wanted everything to be a bit like fun and silly and different and not where you would necessarily see anywhere else. So yeah.
Which makes it work and stand out even more in the red brick suburbs of Manchester.
Yeah, like our front door is pink and our like we have cladding that's green. Just like we're very colourful on the street.
And you live there nearby, don't you?
Yeah, literally around the corner, like 5 minutes away. Yeah. I did like I did the first like 6 months of cycling from Old Trafford to Levenshulme in the cold and dark and was like, nope. So we had to move. Yeah.
So what time does your day start?
7 o'clock, which isn't that early for a bakery.
Yeah.
That's a lion, really. Yeah. We were doing much earlier. We were doing like 6 o'clock, and then we realized that we were like smart. We have this amazing prover with a timer on it. So we can just kind of start whenever we set it so it's everything's ready at 7 o'clock to go straight in the oven.
Mm-hmm.
I think wholesale is starting to be a bit mad, so maybe we might have to start earlier on Saturday soon because we basically like have to go deliver elsewhere and then come back and run the shop.
Yeah.
But at the moment, like I think that was another thing of like running our own business is like we've done crazy shifts elsewhere, like starting at 5:30 and kind of wanted to have a life as well as running the business. And I guess if you can't do that for yourself, then what's the point?
Yeah. Well, like you took the Saturday off, didn't you, to go dancing?
Just close the bakery to go dancing.
Brilliant. That's how life should be.
Mm-hmm.
That's wonderful. So for the foreseeable, Longbois feels that's where you're at.
Yeah, it makes so much sense now. I think like that's the thing about it. I think I was always like, I don't know what I want to do at school, but I think I knew that I wanted to work for myself. So like I've got there now. So
I really love that you, I guess, it just feels like a really organic, natural process how you've come to where you are. And like you said, you could have done it 10 years ago, but it also sounds like your journey was exactly what it needed to be. Like every single step that you've been like you were saying, like working with the woman from the Rose Bakery and just all these different avenues that have kind of helped create, or kind of refine your vision, I suppose, of what it was that you wanted to be doing. And having worked in hospitality and deciding, right, I don't want to do the front of house aspect in the sense of serving.
Yeah.
And so it's retail. So you've really, really honed your idea, what suits you, what you feel that you can offer and what you can do really well.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's so much influence from so many places over the years, like into this one little business now. So yeah.
Oh, well, thank you so much for sharing all of this with me. I found it so fascinating that in a way it feels like you came from quite a kind of academic base, like in terms of working with museums and then to have found your way through to making beautiful cakes is quite an unexpected journey. But
yeah, I think it's funny because I think the creative side won. I think it's hard. I think it probably will always win out. I think it's hard to like stifle it. And I'm glad that I didn't for much longer than I did. Yeah.
And I think that's really powerful if you can allow that to happen, because I think a lot of people are really scared to allow that creativity to come through because of the instability, I guess. You know what? I think we're going to be in Manchester actually, the first weekend before Christmas. Yes, we'll have to come. Oh, that would be a Christmas treat.
And have a huge tree. Last year we got this like way too big a tree for this tiny little shop, and we're going to do the same again. So yeah, very in your face Christmas.
Oh, lovely.
You can find Jenny on Instagram at Jenny_Oak, and you can find the bakery on Instagram at Longbois Bakes, or via the website longboisbakehouse.com. Thank you so much for listening to On the Irregular. Please make sure you review and subscribe, as it helps other listeners find us.